Hello and welcome to this episode of My Safety Consultant with me, Pete Thomas. In this episode, we're going to be talking all about patience. And I think this is one of the single most important things that we can do in business ever. In the world that we live in today, we have a glut of impatience. If I want food, I can just order it on my phone. It appears in my house within seconds. And I'd get very impatient if it didn't happen. Actually, that's not entirely true. I live in Somerset in the middle of nowhere, so we can't get Just Eat or Uber Eats or all of the other things like delivery that you'd get in the cities. But you know what I'm talking about. Everything is at our fingertips. People expect everything to appear now. And I think that we approach business with exactly the same way. And when I was researching this episode, I went on YouTube and typed in about building business. Every single popular video said, I've got $1,000 and I'm going to turn it into $1 million within 60 days, or how I built my first business, exited it after 2 years, and now I've bought a yacht. You know, and you're like, well, okay, come on. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this episode. But first, I got some updates. My Safety Consultant website is now live. It's taken us a long time to get here. MySafetyConsultant.io. The first website we launched was a minimum viable product. We just wanted to test the market, see if you were interested in it, see if you thought it had legs and would add value. And it did. I was really overwhelmed at the response that we've had. So now we've created MySafetyConsultant.io 2.0, right? We're on the new website. Now, there's still a couple of little bugs and glitches. It's always going to be the way. We're constantly going to be fixing bugs and glitches. I mean, if Google and Microsoft have to fix bugs and glitches, then we will too. It is what it is. We've got to be patient, but we will get there. But we've introduced some really cool things. So the new website, the SEO is way better, super important, because ultimately we're advertising you as the member to your ideal customers, right? And the idea is they're going to try and find you on Google. So we've got to be right at the top of Google. That's our plan. The other thing is we've introduced reviews. I think reviews are really, really important and interesting. I've looked at a number of studies on this. People are actually more likely to buy from a company that's got reviews before, like between 4 and 5 than they have at 5 stars out of 5, right? They're quite happy if it's 4.5, because if it's 5, it just looks fake and it looks like they shouldn't trust it. So my point is, we've set up reviews on My Safety Consultant, really excited about it. So I think that's going to be a real game changer in helping consultants to really promote themselves and what they do. And let's face it, reviews are basically like mini case studies that when we set up in business, we're going to get all these case studies and we never have the time to do it because we're always too busy. Now we've got that functionality for you already within the My Safety Consultant website. You can also share an awful lot more information. So you can share videos, you can share case studies, PDFs, content, photographs, whatever you want to really showcase your business. And we've got that functionality within the site. So yeah, it's looking really good. Have a look at it. Let me know your feedback. We built the site, the platform for safety consultants and fire safety consultants. If you look at the site and you think, do you know what, I wish it had this, I wish it had that, I've spotted this, and I think this should be improved, let me know. Drop me an email at info@mysafetyconsultant.io. or connect with me on LinkedIn, Peter Thomas, MSc, drop me a message. Honestly, all feedback, very, very welcome. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatever. It doesn't matter. I just wanted to succeed. I wanted to succeed for the profession, for you, and for the YouTube channel. 51 subscribers. Thank you so much, right? We're in a niche here, right? Safety itself is a niche. Let's be honest. I think safety consultancy is a niche of a niche, okay? So 51 subscribers. I'm really pleased with that. So thank you to each and every one of you. But on one of our videos, we did get 600 views and the vast majority were not subscribers, which means that most people are watching this and they probably haven't hit that subscribe button, probably because you don't realize it's that important. It is important. It really makes a difference because the more subscribers that we have, the more YouTube thinks the show is going to be important, the more it promotes it and pushes it out. I really, really appreciate if you're just going to hit that subscribe button really quickly, because it helps us to make a success of the show. It means that what I'm doing in terms of giving up my time sharing this information is actually useful to you. So please hit that subscribe button. On the last video that we did on white labeling, had quite a few comments. Thank you very much to each and every one of you that's taken the time to comment, both on YouTube and on the LinkedIn. If you comment on the YouTube, I'm going to read it out in here. So the first comment that we've had is, McName's Safety. Hi Pete, I'd like to offer that for new entrants to the world of consultancy, while white labeling may be an effective way to get some experience and outcome can be a daunting challenge, especially if you have no other income and having the opportunity to work in a more established company and can provide some level of comfort and a steady income until a standalone client base has been built. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. You're totally right. And this is really interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at safety consultants and the demographic, I feel like people get into safety consultancy for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of people retire. They will retire from the main job and go, do you know what? I'm going to set up a safety consultant, just do a bit on the side, keep my hand in, and I'll earn a bit of money. A lot of people get made redundant. They get made redundant. They go, I know, my plan B is to set up as a safety consultant. And a lot of people just go, do you know what? I really want to be a safety consultant. This is what I want to do. And they have a really good strategic plan as to enter the market. I think when people get made redundant and they drop into safety consultancy, you're right. They've got to take the work. But long term, it's not going to help you build your business. Because you've got to take the work to get the money in, that is not the right clients that you should use for your safety consultancy. I'm just going to say, doesn't build your brand, doesn't build your business. Granted, over the long term, it will be more detrimental to your business and your brand, but as an introduction to a way of working with a reduced level of risk, it can be beneficial in my humble opinion. Yeah, don't disagree. Love the channel and the output, by the way. Thumbs up, tick, thumbs up. That means a lot. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your support. I appreciate you taking the time to comment. Aspects of safety, Phil Clark. Hi, Phil. Thanks very much for taking the time to message. I think there's a need for white labeling. I did that many years ago, allowing me to have a side hustle whilst in a full-time role without needing to find work or have PLI, PII, etc. Okay. I did Phil's podcast, actually, which should be coming out next year, so you need to look out for that, aspects of safety. If you're not connected with Phil, drop him a message on LinkedIn. Really, really top guy. And Phil, I know you know what you're talking about, but not everyone does. And there are people out there, I don't know of any, because every consultant that I know works really hard, is diligent, and really, really wants to make a difference. But we've all heard the stories of safety consultants out there that just don't, right? That there are those people out there that aren't necessarily qualified to do the job. And when we start saying things like they don't have the PLI or PII, whose PLI or PII are they working under, right? Because if you get a safety consultant working under another safety consultant, each one thinks they're working under each other's insurance. And really, they're just flipping winging it. It's not ideal. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like white labeling, because I just think the contractual arrangements around the insurance just aren't good enough for where it should be. But there we go. And I also, the side hustle thing, and like so many people jump into safety consultancy and they go, I'm going to do it as a side hustle, right? And you're like, okay, cool. And then a couple of years later, they're not doing it as a side hustle anymore. They're now in full-time employment and they've got a dormant limited company, because like a side hustle is just, at some point, you're going to make the decision to jump into business both feet. A side hustle, just dipping your toe in the water, is not going to help you to achieve what you want to achieve. Okay, a few years ago, I visited a couple of whiskey distilleries up in Scotland. And one of the things that always struck me was how the whiskey distilleries were set up and who set them up. And it always amazed me, the stories of these guys that had retired. They were fairly old, I think it's fair to say, and they'd set up a whiskey distillery. Now, if you know anything about whiskey, you know that the distilled product isn't the end of the production. It's got to sit. But there's probably going to be some whiskey drinkers, right, on this thing going, sit. It doesn't sit, Pete. But basically, it has to be held in casks for a long period of time until the whiskey develops that taste, depth, and flavor. And some of the best whiskeys sit for 30 years plus until they can develop that flavor that's good enough to sell. The interesting thing for me was this. The people that set up those distilleries, they were never going to profit from that business. And not only were they never going to profit from it, they were probably never even going to get to taste the good whiskey that came from all of the fruits of their labor. So all of that effort that they put in, they were never going to get to benefit from it. And that really stuck with me, because if they weren't going to make money from it and they weren't going to get to taste the product, what were they doing it for? They were doing it for their legacy, for their name, for their reputation, to achieve something that was bigger than them, to pass something on to their family, to make a difference. All of these reasons, these real, as Simon Sinek would say, start with why. It's not just to make a bit of cash. It was something way bigger. And when you can think about something way bigger, you're going to have a much, much better chance of finding success in business. And I feel like when we look at today and our sort of quick profit way of working. I feel like we can really learn a lot from that traditional approach in business. It's this idea that business is about legacy. It's not just about immediate returns that we're going to see in the short term. So patience is really crucial in business. Even a brand and reputation takes a long time to establish. I think about it in terms of, we look at the big fire safety consultancies, for example, and I can name a couple of fire safety consultancies now that everybody trusts, everybody knows them, and their name is pretty much on everything. I'm not going to name any names. I've got a lot of respect for this consultancy. I think they do a really great job, and you probably know who I'm talking about. But their brand, their name is absolutely everywhere. And they didn't get that overnight. They didn't get that because they plowed some money in some LinkedIn ads. They didn't get that because, I don't know, they chucked everything in year one at their business and then went, oh, well, that didn't work. No, they built that business over a very, very long period of time. It takes a long time to build brand and reputation. When we're building a website, some companies out there, they will build websites to sell them. They know that when they build that website, it's going to take 6 to 12 months at least to build up the recognition on Google in terms of the search engine optimization. So when someone goes on Google and searches for that website, it's going to take 6 to 12 months for it to rank or score anywhere. And that's Google. The internet is incredibly fast, incredibly powerful. Think about how slow it is to build a business by word of mouth in comparison. It can take 20 years to build a business by word of mouth. And I feel like some people, they will try to build their business in 3 months. If it hasn't worked, they'll go, well, it didn't work. It didn't work. The market is wrong, or the economy is wrong, or the time is wrong. And by the way, all of those things might be valid, but the truth of the matter is we just haven't given it long enough. And I've been guilty of this in the past myself. A few years ago, I was traveling and I set up a podcast, not for money, but just for fun. I just set up a podcast for fun, just to document the travel and the journey, really. The podcast itself did okay, right? I mean, okay, couple of listeners every so often, maybe 40, 50 people following the show. When I say okay, right? Definitely wasn't Joe Rogan. A few months ago, I checked on the stats just to have a look. 45,000 listens. It wasn't that we hadn't done enough. It wasn't that it was a bad idea. It wasn't that, I don't know, any of the excuses that you can possibly think of, insert here now. It was just that we hadn't given it enough time. I'd done enough to get the thing moving. I'd done enough to get some momentum built up. I just hadn't given it enough time to see where it could get to. And I fear that so many people do that with their business. They will try an idea, they scattergun approach it, lots of little ideas, and then go, it didn't work, and then move on to the next thing. Just never gave it enough time. I think patience is really essential to building scalable systems within organizations. I mean, we've all seen these huge companies. We've seen one in the last couple of years that went for an initial public offering where the company is going to be listed on the stock market. The company had grown very, very quickly, like extraordinarily quickly. It was one of the biggest companies that just blown up overnight due to massive investment. And it's only when it went to IPO that people started doing their due diligence. And when the due diligence was done, it was found that it was, how do I say this in a fair way? The foundations of the organization weren't there. And so the company was undermined. So even though it had grown so rapidly that it didn't have the time to build the structures that it needed to build in order to create the due diligence that was required to go for IPO. And in the end, that was its undoing. I think scaling a business doesn't mean that you have to do everything at once. It means incremental increases and improvement. If a business is improving, it's heading the right way. It just takes time. Like for us with My Safety Consultant, I've got a ton of plans for My Safety Consultant. But at the moment, we've got our initial strategy and we're working on that. When that's completed, we'll move on to the next thing. I see this with safety consultants and that they offer all services to all people. So rather than niche, and I'm not talking about being like super niche, but rather than saying, right, we'll package up, say, fire risk assessment, and we're going to offer fire risk assessment, we're going to target offices and shops, for example. And that's our package. That's what we offer. That's what we promote. And then we're going to give that some time until that's successful. And then we're going to add in another strategy to package up in our marketing. So many people just go, well, I do everything from asbestos to events to hospitality. I'll do fire, I'll do safety, I'll do training, everything. Now, the issue with that is that it's like a scattergun approach, and we haven't really focused on building the business in one area. And then we end up with a scattergun approach to marketing. So when we go on LinkedIn, we're just scattergunning a ton of things, and we're not actually giving it the time to yield the results. So, you can't tell a lot from one post when you put something, say, on LinkedIn. It takes you a long time to actually start to build up that reputation. And sometimes you could post something and it just falls flat. And other times you can post the exact same thing and it just hits for some reason. When you build consistency, you can start to measure and track performance. But that takes time. It takes, 90 days of consistent effort just to see if someone is going to yield the results that you want it to yield. So how do we adopt patience within our business then? So I look at those traditional tools like SWOT and PESTLE, actually build a strategy. And I'm going to do a video on strategy at some point because I think it's really important. Strategy isn't a plan. Strategy is about how you take your resources and you leverage those to the maximum in the environment that you're in, whether it's the economy, whether it's the area, whatever it can be, in order to maximize the outputs that you have. And I think strategy is very different to a plan. So posting 4 times a week on LinkedIn isn't a strategy. It's just a plan. And so I think it's really important to get the strategy right for business. If we can get the strategy right in the outset, then we can really leverage that over the long term when we have this sort of patient and consistent approach. The other thing that's really important is about compound interest. I love the compounding effect. I think it's so valuable. And there's an old story about the king and the chessboard. The chap invented the chessboard. This geezer invented a chessboard, right? And the king was so impressed. He said, well, how can I ever repay you? And the chap said, well, I'll have some grains of rice and a grain of rice on each of the squares on a chessboard and double it for each one. The king said, yeah, of course, that's mad. That's simple. Yeah, of course you can have a grain of rice doubled for each square on a chessboard. But this is the power of compound interest, right? Because obviously the first square was 1, second square was 2 grains, third square was 4 grains. And by the 10th square, it was 1,024 grains of rice. By the 20th, it's over 1 million grains of rice. By the 40th, it was 1 trillion grains of rice. And by the 64th square, it was 18 quintillion grains of rice, more than all of the grains of rice in the world. And this is just the power of compound interest. If we take the squares as a year and we double our output in a year by 64 years, we will have, an absolutely phenomenal amount. Now, I know many of us aren't planning on setting up our consultancy and running it for 64 years, but you can see if you doubled your output every single year, then you're going to achieve a massive return. So here's my thoughts. Patience is an absolute superpower. It's an absolute competitive advantage in a world of instant gratification. There are so many businesses that are springing up left, right, and center, and there are so many businesses that fall by the wayside. I think patience is the number one most important thing in business. And here's my suggestion to you. Evaluate your strategy. Have a look at what you're trying to achieve in business. And then don't think so short term. Don't think, well, I want to achieve this in 3 months. Think about what you can achieve within 5 years and actually reverse engineer it and work out how you increase and actually look at doubling performance every year from where you are now. And the interesting thing is there, you'll see actually how little you have to do now in order to improve that performance, but just do it consistently and do it as if you're in the game for the long term, not for the short term. Finally, I'll leave you with one more anecdote, and this episode is just full of anecdotes, isn't it? The Japanese bamboo. They say the Japanese bamboo, when you plant it, it needs to be looked after, it needs to be nurtured, it needs to be watered daily, and it doesn't grow for the first 5 years. Literally doesn't grow. After that, in the 5th year, it grows 80 foot in a single year. Like, it's just an astronomical amount. And by the way, this is true. I say this is true. I've just heard it mentioned a ton of times. But it's just this thing that you put in all this effort for a very, very long period of time. And all of a sudden on the 5th year, that's when you reap the rewards. I think the reason why this is so important is it's working out where you want to be in 5 years' time when you get that 80 foot of growth, not about where you want to be next week. And you need to realize that all of the effort that you're putting in now, it is working. It is. You've just got to give it enough time. You've just got to be patient. So that's all I've got for this episode. Thank you very much. If you're listening to this and you like the idea of patience in business, then drop me a message. Let me know what you liked about it. Let me know what you didn't like about it. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you.